begin playing a better game right now. In other words, actually be in a curious question with yourself, looking at what is my best game right now. And it may be, okay, I've had 3 glasses of wine. I wish I'd stopped at 2. My best game right now is to not have any more.
Our next guest is Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer. She is a licensed dietary nutritionist, a clinical nurse specialist, a doctor of chiropractic. At 25, she was the co-owner of the first boutique strength training facility in Chicago. She has 20 plus years of experience and she is the physician founder of Well Empowered. She is here today to help us break away from the all or nothing health paradigm that is holding us back.
To me, movement is about so much more than just producing some health results. It's many things, but one of the things I see for myself when I move is
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Our next guest is Dr. Jessie Hehmeyer. She is currently based in Costa Rica. It was recently Switzerland. Now it's Costa Rica. So if some howler monkeys break out in the background, don't be surprised. She is a licensed dietary nutritionist, a clinical nurse specialist, a doctor of chiropractic. At 25, she was the co-owner of the first boutique strength training facility in Chicago. She has 20 plus years of experience and she is the physician founder of Well Empowered. She shared in one of her interviews that at one point in her career, she was a cardio addict. I don't know if we'll get to talk about that. After exiting her boutique strength training company, she went back to get her master's, showing her dedication to both helping people and furthering her knowledge to help those same people. She is here today to help us break away from the all or nothing health paradigm that is holding us back and help us master our health and live well empowered. Dr. Hehmeyer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
All right. So your first degree was in sociology from UCLA. Then you started a gym in Chicago. Then you became a chiropractor. If I understand correctly, there was a bit of dancing in there somewhere. Before we get into all that exciting meat, I want to go further back and understand young Jessie. Where did you grow up? What was it like growing up as little Jessie? As you were growing up, were there indications that you would end up in the health industry and maybe as an entrepreneur?
That is a great question, Chris. So, well, to start with where I grew up, the easiest part, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, just north of Chicago, a suburb called Northbrook to be exact. And in fact, if you've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you've seen a little bit of Northbrook. And I'll tell you where you saw it. One is when Ferris picks up Salone on the steps. That's my high school. That's Glenbrook North. Go Spartans.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then also the Save Ferris on the water tower. That was also Northbrook. So there you go. John Hughes went to my high school. Yeah. And, I grew up, I have 3 brothers and my older brother and I, we were the solo 2 for about 10 years until my next brother, Joe, 10 years younger than me, came along. And then my youngest brother, Ted, and all the same parents, big gap. But, a few different things that kind of pointed towards having something to do with health and wellness. One is, both my parents always encouraged and inspired a sense of curiosity and learning. But I remember one of my earliest memories, Chris, is sitting with a book from National Geographic on the body and not even being able to read at that point, but going through these photos of the nervous system and what the heart looked like and just being like, oh my gosh, my mind being blown by the wonder of it all. So I think there was something in, that early memory stuck is a great clue to me that I would somehow move in the direction of really learning the science behind how our body works and also ultimately, in different ways pointing towards how I might, for myself and others, work to understand how to guide people and really caring for their health and their body as sacred.
Any influences that might have pointed to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, my dad was an entrepreneur from the time, I think he started his business when I was about 4 or so.
Mm.
And, it's funny. My 3 brothers, they all, do what, actually 2 of them are mainstream MDs, and we don't have any doctors in our family, which is kind of funny. We're like, are we starting something? And then my other brother does, just fabulous work in real estate finance for JLL. But it's a funny thing that, for me, it was, of the 4 of us, I was the one who was always like, yeah, the entrepreneurship thing really stuck. My brothers did entrepreneurial things in their younger years, kind of through college and stuff like that. My older brother had a window washing business in college called Brighter Outlook, and just did a fabulous job on the North Shore of Chicago. I mean, it was like amazing the work he did, and that he walked away at the end of the summer with, money to enjoy the year ahead with. So my dad definitely was the inspiration around entrepreneurship.
Very cool. And then you decided sociology. This will be the kind of the last personal, so we can jump into stuff. Like, was there something driving you towards sociology?
Yes, and I hope you laugh when I say this. It worked really well for my workout schedule. That is the honest to God truth. Right. Growing up in the north suburbs of Chicago and going to UCLA, I mean, I was California dreaming. I was like, oh my gosh, I am in Eden. This is amazing, right? And so my priority was being outside, enjoying moving, being outside. And so, the sociology courses really, like, they worked well for my workout schedule. So that's how I ultimately became a sociology major. It may have been a little helpful to do a little college counseling. I actually didn't do that, but it, I always say straight lines are boring. And in all, truth be told, some of the things I learned in sociology are planted seeds that allowed me to move to a place where I bring heart and science together.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and we might touch on that kind of later in this interview. I love the phrase, exercise is not a punishment for what you ate. It is a celebration of what your body can do. And dance is the absolute embodiment of that phrase. I could have gotten this wrong. What's the dance background that you have? How does dance fit in your life? I think it does.
Oh, it totally does. Yeah. I grew up dancing. And so dancing was a big part of my childhood life. And even through college, I kept dancing, taking a variety of classes. For me, ballet was always a foundation, but it wasn't a great match for my body or my personality. I love watching it, but tap, jazz, African dance, these are things that for me really are super enlivening. So those were all, a big part of my life for a long time. And I've kind of, as an adult, gone in and out of dance in different ways. And most recently, it usually shows up as turning on music and dancing with my nieces, which is, when we're together, an absolute, must, regular occurrence. We go through different songs. They're currently 7, 4, and 2. So in the fall, it was Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And now it's Chapel Row and Hot to Go. So, we go through our different songs. That's where we're currently on.
Isn't it cool when the younger generation is actually listening to songs that we grew up with? Like, that's just kind of cool. When I play songs, I've got 14-year-old twins, and when I play an older song, a song that I grew up with, and they actually know the words, I'm like, how do you know the words? This is amazing. All right.
It feels so redeeming.
Yes, it was good. Like exactly. Telling our parents. Right. So talk about your experience with CityWide SuperSlow, and how has that kind of molded your journey today? Because that was a really early kind of entree into health, wellness, and, talk about that, please.
Yeah, well, so going into being a founding owner of CityWide SuperSlow, a few things I'd say. You mentioned early on that prior to that, I was a bit of a cardio addict, to say the least, right? And somewhere in the early 2000s, about 2001, I was introduced to this type of strength training called SuperSlow or slow strength training. And just to say a little bit to the listeners about what SuperSlow is it's a type of strength training that, in the way of how it's structured, it's about a 30-minute workout. You're doing every exercise to complete fatigue. And so what I mean by that, you are doing it to the point where you cannot move the weight and you keep trying for 10 more seconds. You're also, as the name would suggest, moving very slowly, 10 seconds to lift, 10 seconds to lower, and you're doing only one set to that complete fatigue. So just a little bit about that, right? And how I got introduced to it was I was a total disbeliever. I just thought it was nonsense. Like, how could I get outcomes from working out for 30 minutes when I was working out for a couple of hours a day? I just didn't think it was possible. And yet it was, right? So it was a really powerful introduction to the science behind exercise. And so when I founded SuperSlow with a fabulous husband and wife, Denise and Keith Morton, who are still the other owners of SuperSlow, another couple about my half, but it was really in service of bringing this work to others. And a number of things I learned is, just what it is to be a part of someone's health and wellness journey. I just love it. It's so fun, in that instance, to be able to see people go, oh my gosh, I never thought I could be strong, and I'm strong. To see people in the moment triumph over their upset or frustration with moving, right? To me, movement is about so much more than just, producing some health results. It's really, learning, it's many things, but one of the things I see for myself when I move is I learn about myself in a unique way, right? When we encounter who we are, when we are struggling, we can learn to work with ourselves. And so exercise can be a way to learn to work with ourselves through struggles that really shows up in all areas of our lives, whether it's in our relationships or how we're eating or our sleep or our use of social media. We can learn to help ourselves lovingly do the thing that we know will make a difference. And that is, to me, one of the great things about movement and exercise, and SuperSlow is a great example of that, because you're really going to deal with your struggling in that.
So you're a bona fide and self-declared cardio addict, and you, how do they convince you to even try SuperSlow? Like, did you see some great results with somebody, and then you're like, oh, I got to try that at least, or what did that look like?
It's so funny, Chris. It's like there's so many things, right? It's like the perfect combination. My mom had mentioned it to me at one point, and I was like, yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah,
right?
What do moms know anyway?
Right, exactly. Right. And then honestly, what was the mindset shift for me was I participated in a workshop, a 3-day seminar really, in 2001 that allowed me to see the stories I had, the way I listened to people, the beliefs that I held as truths that weren't necessarily so. And it was shortly after that, that again, my mom lovingly said, hey, Jessie, you might want to check this out. And that really allowed me to hear it. The course itself, and you may be familiar with it. It was the Landmark Forum. And so for me, it really allowed me to hear things differently. And so when my mom suggested, okay, I do think you should check this out because, you're running like 2 hours a day and I don't know how sustainable that is, right? And she was right. And so I started to research SuperSlow and do some SuperSlow. And then ultimately that led me to go down and be certified. I did a certification level 1, level 2, master certification with the founder of SuperSlow, Ken Hutchins, down in Florida. So I to this day, I'm a huge proponent of slow strength training. And when I'm back in Chicago, I typically get in either at CityWide SuperSlow, still there. We opened the doors July 1st, 2022. So, 2002 rather, 2002. Yeah. So 22 years old and still going strong. And whether it's with them or one of the other slow strength training facilities, there's one in Lake Forest where one of my brothers lives that I'll go to sometimes too.
That it sounds amazing. I mean, it makes sense. I know I have a personal trainer and we'll do some slow training. One set to complete fatigue sounds really painful. I'm just going to leave it at that, right? It doesn't, there's nothing easy.
Yeah. And, one of the things I've seen over the years is like, when I first got into SuperSlow, I was very much a purist. I was like, this is the only way, right? And the truth is I still love SuperSlow. And of course, there are millions of ways to strength train and be fit. And so to me, I'm always like, are you doing something that you'll keep doing? Great. Keep doing that. There's not one right way.
Yeah, and I think as we get older, we need to be thinking about, sarcopenia and what is the strength training that we're doing. And, if doing a super slow session is not for you, then don't go down that path. Like don't fight your own kind of mindset. You have a concept of compressing morbidity. Can you talk about that concept and where it sits?
Yeah. So the term compression of morbidity, what that means is, morbidity is fundamentally suffering, right? And so we want to have that time, if we want to do our best to vote for making that time as short as possible. Of course, we can't control everything, right? But we can vote for an intended future. And so compression of morbidity really means that we live a long, rich, and beautiful life. And then we die fast, right? We are frolicking in the ocean at 100 plus, 120, right? And then we wake up the next day dead, right? That's what we all wish for. So compression of morbidity really is referring to doing what we know to do to honor our health and sacred such that we're voting for alive and quickly dead.
Yeah, I did a longevity summit, and one of the conclusions, and I don't even remember where this came from, was that the kind of ideal life is a great analogy is a candle flame, right? Because that candle flame, and that's what you're talking about, it's all compressed morbidity, where that candle flame burns exactly the same all the way, and then it's done. And I think that's where people would really like to be, or maybe not to die ever. Like that seems to be more and more on the radar these days.
Mm-hmm.
You also have a concept called mastering the middle ground. What do you mean by that, and why do you think it's so important?
So mastering the middle ground, I'll say a little bit more about, there are a few other things that I think will be helpful to understand mastering the middle ground. So mastering the middle ground is in direct opposition, I would say, or at least very much different from the paradigm we've inherited in this area of health and vitality. And that is one of the all or nothing approach, right? So the all or nothing approach, if we think about nutrition, it is commonly expressed as overindulgence or deprivation, and dancing back and forth between those two. And the thing about this all or nothing overindulgence or deprivation approach is, first of all, it doesn't work. And by work, I mean, it doesn't allow people to produce and sustain the health outcomes they feel the most that are most important to them. Two is it comes from a place of self-aggression. And where I would invite you listeners to look at to see, does that seem true to me? Right? Look at how you feel after you have overindulged or after you've gone through a period of deprivation. Does it feel like self-love or does it feel like self-aggression? I would say for most people, and certainly in my history when that was the approach I took, I know for me for sure it was self-aggression. And, it not working, and it is fundamentally a call to come up with a whole new way of approaching our health and ourselves. And so that's what I call authoring or mastering your middle ground. And this middle ground is this not too tight, not too loose area, right? Overindulgence and indulgence are two very different things, right? So indulgence means that when you're making choices, a few things. First of all, you have the experience of being in the driver's seat, right? Versus being owned by the food or the situation or the people around you. And it also means when you indulge selectively, right, you are able to produce the outcomes you care the most about, right? With overindulgence, you can't do that. So, when people are in the journey of mastering their middle ground, when I work with them, we do a lot of work to kind of look at, okay, where are you right now? What are your unique challenges? And what are the outcomes you care the most about? What are your physiological barriers, right? We're looking at labs. I'm tracking people in their lives, how they're moving and sleeping and digesting and nutrition, all these different things. And with that, we begin to map a path ahead that really is one born of mastering one's middle ground. And so it becomes a partnership with guidance so that people do arrive at a place where, one of the greatest things that I've heard is, I remember, last year around this time, one of my patients reached out to me and said, this holiday season was the first year I didn't arrive at January 1st wanting to new year, new me myself, right? Because I swayed. I didn't break. I just made choices. Yeah, okay, fine. I had the 2 glasses of wine there and I had the cookie there, but I didn't say, screw it, right? I took that middle ground approach and made choices and felt like I was in the driver's seat in making those choices. And that's what I love.
Yeah. So, and it's great that she didn't have this new year, new me paradigm, because that doesn't work anyway, right? Like the data on New Year's resolutions is just crazy. People don't accomplish it. And then I hadn't really thought about the concept of indulgence versus overindulgence and how one is to enjoy and one is to be a slave to. I think that's a really, really great concept. There is the phrase, all things in moderation. I also think that the phrase all things in moderation needs to be moderated. So every now and then, like, you do need to run, maybe, if this is your proclivity, a marathon, because that's probably not the best thing for you. But all things in moderation, including the phrase moderation. Maybe you're going to have a couple extra drinks with your brother on Friday. Oh, wait, that's me, because he's coming in town, right? So, I think that this is having that balance. Is there something that's kind of plagued you that you've struggled with in terms of overindulgence and indulgence that you'd be willing to share?
Oh, totally. Yeah. For me, for a long time, it was nutrition, right? So for me, until about 2004, that's when I really drew a line in the sand for me around my relationship with food and my body. And before that, and I know if any of you listeners are were dancers growing up, you probably heard that right away. Most dancers are like, yeah, I know, there's typically a lot of concern about how you look when you're looking in the mirror all the time. And by the way, the whole world is getting a taste of that right now with Instagram and social media, right? It's like, oh yeah, if you grew up dancing in the 80s and 90s, you kind of had that, right? So, but for me, it was really in about 2004 that I saw that how it just wasn't working for me, this all or nothing approach. And a few things. One is, I just got sick of it, and not like a bad me beat myself up. It was just like, this is not how my life is going to go, right? My life is supposed to be about so much more, about what I'm eating or not, or how I look or not. And so I just really got curious about how could I create a new path forward that allows me to experience being empowered such that I'm able to show up as my best self and fully experience the beauty and love in my life, and also maximize my ability to contribute to others. So when that became my North Star, rather than, what's the scale say? And I'm not saying don't weigh yourself. That's a different conversation. But when that became the North Star, my intended experience and how I intended to live my life, it just changed everything, right? And when I work with people, I actually, out of the gate, we work on what I call authoring your vision of vitality for your health in your life. And that is one of the many things that can be really useful in helping people create a whole new era around how they relate to food in their body. Because, the thing is, while I work with people on a variety of things from, hormonal dysregulation to digestive distress to skin shenanigans, acne, psoriasis, autoimmune disorders, all those things, for a lot of people, their relationship with food is really a big struggle. And, all we need to do is look at these GLPs to see evidence of that, right? People wouldn't be reaching for medications that cost $1,000 a month to solve a problem if it were an easy, obvious solve, right? And so it does take something, and it's very, very solvable, but it needs to be born of a whole new paradigm and approach.
And you mentioned the authoring your kind of own vision. I think, we'll get on to the next question. So the impression that I got from one of the interviews that I listened to while preparing for this interview was that you spend a lot of time working with people on how they speak and think about their health journey, about their vision, authoring their vision. Was that true from the very beginning? So back when you were in super slow days, or have you given this more and more attention as your practice has grown?
Definitely more and more attention as my practice has grown. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Chris. I would say there was a time, kind of a younger me that may have thought about it from do you remember Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live? Like, it's okay if you don't. But anyway, it was like positive affirmations, right? Gosh darn it, I'm smart enough. And, people like me like that. It was a whole shtick. Anyway, you get the point, right? There was a period where it was like positive affirmations. And I'm not, I don't mean to criticize positive affirmations. It's not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just that that's not what this is, right? This is really developing a whole new relationship with food. And so there are many different ways to access a new reality. And one of them is with our language. Now, the thing is, we need to make sure our language doesn't live as a lie in our mind, right? So if you don't feel great in your jeans, your brain's going to know you're lying. If you're like, I look amazing, I look hot in these jeans, your brain's going to be like, you're lying. No, you don't. I don't think so, right? So I'm not saying lie, right? But it's tapping into a different kind of truth, right? So an example of this, right, different language would be, instead of talking about food as good or bad, which collapses morality with how we're caring for our body. And typically when we do that, that's a fast track to shame. And for most of us, shame is not super effective in causing long-term shifts in this area, right? In this area of life. So we want to, in that case, one of the things I talk to people about is talking about the quality of your food. High quality or low quality, high in nutrients, low in nutrients, right? Aligned with my intention, not aligned with my intention. Those are useful. Those actually, when I think about useful, what I'm looking for is, do they open up the world for a new action, or do they keep you stuck? And I was bad yesterday, or I cheated yesterday. It just really doesn't free most people up to take new actions. It more than anything gets people stuck in this vicious cycle of overindulgence or deprivation, rather than, wow, gosh, if I look at what I ate yesterday, it really doesn't align with my intention. And, in fact, I kind of regret it. So if I could learn from it, like if someone were to say that, they could look back and say, okay, well, what happened was I didn't go to the grocery store on Sunday when I said I was going to, and so I didn't have the food in the house that I needed. Okay, great. So maybe we can create a schedule or system around getting food in your house that works for you. And there's so much to this, right? There's strategy, there's information, there's working with, the ever shifting landscape of life, right? So there's a lot to this work, but it is so fun to see the light bulb go on, and to people really getting this, because it's tremendous what a difference it makes.
Yeah, I think anytime you're able to dig into language, so I did comedy improv for a while, And if you've touched on comedy improv, there's the first rule is yes and instead of yes but. And if you start going down a path where you're paying attention to it, you will realize that you say but a lot, and you will start to adjust that and switch to and. And even if you don't ultimately, that doesn't become an inherent part of how you speak, the analysis is very useful, right? So how are people speaking to themselves about food? Good, bad, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. And then to say nutritious, not nutritious, I think that's really good. I'll probably be having some conversations with my kids based on that. And then also the good, bad, it goes back to the exercise quote that I really like that I mentioned earlier, which is exercise is not a punishment for what you ate. It's a celebration of what your body can do. I think all of that makes a lot of sense. And you've probably gotten a lot better at kind of helping people, kind of needling people to move in the right direction as time has gone on. Is there anything to share, like some strategies that have been really beneficial for you?
Yeah, well, one of them is when I work with people, I actually give them, I call them fulfillment exercises, because they're intended to help people fulfill on what they're committed to fulfilling on in the area of health, right? And so some of these are around looking at how you're being with yourself, right? And some of these are around actual data information, right? Maybe there's a lab marker. I want them to understand at a new level why do we care about that lab number? What's it telling us about your body and the actions we're taking to shift it? Why would you take those actions? Right. So it might be something in that information and science world, and then it might be in the strategy world. So, I do have some fulfillment exercises on language and helping people really get, of course, we're talking about it, but most of us, one conversation doesn't usually shift a big lifelong habit. So reinforcing it in other ways like that can be really helpful.
Do you have an example of a fulfillment exercise?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that comes to mind is in the kind of like the insight world, there is a blog post. I did not write it. A blog post on something called Ahimsa, Ahimsa, and it's really the practice of nonviolence. And typically we think of like, okay, nonviolence as it pertains to others and maybe creatures and things like that. But what if we brought that to ourselves, right? Nonviolence to ourselves. So that's one example. And then always with these fulfillment exercises, there are usually about 5 different questions that people answer. And they're really just designed, there's no getting them wrong. They're just designed for people to tease out what is most relevant for where they are in their personal journey. The first question on nearly all of them is, what did you find most useful or interesting, right? Just what do you find? What did you think, right? And then there will be others along to help them in kind of teasing out what's helpful. There's another one, for example, I like giving this to people who really struggle with sleep hygiene. So there's a podcast interview. There are actually a few, but there's one in particular I've selected with Matthew Walker, the author of Why We Sleep, right? Yeah. And so it's a great podcast. I understand people are super busy. So to ask them to read the full book, I'll suggest, it's a resource if you'd like it, but here's the podcast. And so again, it's not, that one's more in the information world because it's not so much about strategizing sleep hygiene, but it's about, okay, why do we even care about sleep? What is this magical superpower of sleep? And he dives into the science in a very approachable way, as it sounds like so that would be an example of something in the information world. And again, paired with questions.
It's interesting. You said the first question is like, what did you find most interesting? When I took improv, I think the most valuable thing of taking improv was the instructor would actually come out of a particular exercise and go like, what did you find most interesting about that? Like, what was it challenging? Was it, trying to hold an accent or the fact that they twisted your story the wrong way and that made me uncomfortable? And there's a lot, that's how you learn even more about yourself. Dr. Matthew Walker's book, I reference it regularly. It's actually referenced in my book. And I call it, you'll appreciate this this callback, I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books. Unlike Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, who scares you out of your dreams, Matthew Walker's book will scare you into your dreams.
That is genius, Chris. I love it. I love it. That is so good. That is so good.
The book is really terrifying. Like, it really is terrifying about what happens to you when you don't get sleep.
100%. And I mean, I don't know about you, but there may be some things that are like, oh, obviously everybody knows sleep. But for me, whatever it is that I'm, looking to shift, I really need to learn about it to have the hard things become more compelling. For me, it's like a family badge of honor that, like, on my mom's side of the family, my dad used to joke that the Hans, my mom's maiden name is Han. The Hans don't get tired. They just run around till the feeling goes away. And that was very much true for me for a long time. And honestly, again, it was a it was a Matthew Walker podcast that first got me go, oh my gosh, I'd made some shifts, but it really, it called me to a whole new level of integrity around how I relate to sleep and honor my sleep.
Yeah. No, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It scared me into my dreams, just like you said.
You're a perfect example.
Exactly.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So anytime you're starting a new venture, there's a lot of stress, right? You're an entrepreneur. With a health and wellness business, some of the stress is whether I'm even going to be able to help some people, right? Like, you have some confidence in some people, but maybe not all people. As you were launching Well Empowered, was there any person early on you were able to help and that really spoke to you, telling you that you did the right thing starting Well Empowered?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such a great question. Well, I'll actually even go back to before Well Empowered, because when I started practicing functional medicine, I first worked for another practice because I knew that I really just wanted to focus on my clinical skills. And I did that for about 4 years or so. And I remember some of the early people who came in, and I'm thinking of one in particular who had all kinds of digestive distress. And we did the labs on her and we figured out what needed to be done. And she started making shifts and she came back in and she was like, yeah, I mean, the bloating, the constipation gone, it's all gone. And I was like, really? It wasn't like I'd had all this clinical training, right? It wasn't like I had nothing, but I was like, wow, this stuff is really magic. I mean, it's
You're like, really? Wait, Dr. Hehmeyer, you should not be so surprised. Like,
I know. You're the one who told me to do these things, right? But it's such a funny thing. And, it's still to this day, not to that extent, but to this day, it still always amazes me. Like, this works. This stuff really works. We're not throwing darts. We are getting information. We are taking a targeted approach. And it just works. It's awesome. I love it.
So talking about your approach, right? So you speak from your heart about a heart-centered approach. That's very right-brained, right? I think I got right-brained, right? And then you also talk about data-driven natural medicine, very left-brain. How do you marry these? And do you struggle sometimes? It's probably valuable for the clients that you see because you can speak both of those. But how do you marry those two?
Yeah, well, so it's funny because I do think sometimes when I'm speaking in these conversations, I talk more in the heart-centered approach and less in the data-driven approach, but I really am both, right? And so the data-driven approach in many ways, I don't talk about it a lot because it's like, well, that's the easy stuff. It's like once we figure out what tests to run, which is something, right? We don't want to be, there are a gajillion tests we could run. We want to run the right tests for the right person. So once we figure out what tests we need to run, the answers are in them, and so by tests, I'm looking at, what we might call standard lab tests. This is part of the data we're collecting. And by standard, I simply mean that you're going to a big lab company like Quest to have your blood drawn. There's really nothing standard about the labs I run because I let people know, listen, you're going to feel like you're donating blood. We're going to get a lot of information. And I even have people who, there are certain pockets of the world where people are going to quest with some frequency who work with me, and the phlebotomists will know my name, right? They're like, oh yeah, she does. Like they know what's coming, right? So that's, part of the data. And then of course there's this whole world of specialty labs where we get more data. And these are things like microbiome assessment or adrenal and sex hormones, if we're trying to understand something going on with menstrual cycles or fertility or even skin. We might be looking at food sensitivities. Those are just some of the many, mold toxicity. These are just some of the many specialty lab assessments we might run if useful. So, that's the whole data part. And then, bringing it back to the heart, right? I talked about authoring your vision and vitality. That is the beginning of our work together, starts there really. I also, when I'm providing people with guidance, right? Once we actually have these numbers, this data to take action on, I know I'm a person who needs to really understand the why behind a recommendation, right? Again, that goes back to the reading Matthew Walker's book, right? Like I need to understand the why to do something that's hard for me because I really like to stay up late, it's fun. So I need to know the why, right? And I just assume that most people are like me, at least most of the people who I work with, right? They're learners, they're committed evolvers. And so when we're looking at lab results, I'm walking them through, what does this mean for you and your health, right? What does this data, this number that we're looking at, whether it's low B12 or high homocysteine or, whatever the case may be, what does it mean specific to you and your health and the outcomes that matter most to you and the symptoms you're experiencing and the conundrums? And to me, it is so cool. Like, I feel like a detective of sorts, Chris, right? I get these labs in and I get so excited to look at them. And then it's like, it's like the puzzle pieces start to come together and it becomes clear, okay, what is our step forward? What's our path ahead to healing? And not only that, but we're going to circle back. We do those labs again to measure progress. Of course, I want people to notice the difference, whether it's around energy or digestion or skin or hormones or weight. I want them to notice the difference, but we also want those objective measurements to see what's happening under the hood, to see the shifts that we're causing.
Committed evolvers. I love that. Like, I don't know if you just coined that phrase or whatever. It's something that will stick with me. I heard somewhere that you have like one tip to get your body back to what it once was. What is that tip?
Well, and one thing I would say, just to phrase that a little bit differently, is as opposed to get your body to back what it once was, it's just like to really feel your best, look your best, and be your best, right? Because that will be however it is. And there are plenty of people who I work with who, when they step into moving from the self-love, mastering your middle ground, it's like what they're able to manifest in their health and in their body is completely different than what it was before, right? In the most amazing way, right? But what I would say is, my tip is to begin playing a better game right now. In other words, actually be in a curious question with yourself. And that question is, what is my best game right now in this moment, right? So that could be around how you're fueling your body, what you're eating and drinking. It could be around how you're moving. It could be around sleep or your use of social media, or your time spent connecting with others, right? Really looking at what is my best game right now. And it may be, okay, I've had 3 glasses of wine. I wish I'd stopped at 2. My best game right now is to not have any more. Okay, good. Great. Wonderful. Maybe it is, okay, my best game right now is I intended to get 45 minutes of movement in my day, but work came up, the kids came up, someone needed something for me, and now I only have 20 minutes. Well, I'll take these 20 minutes. I wanted the 45, but I will take these 20, right? So it's really looking at, okay, what is my best game right now? And really in earnest engaging in that question and leaning into the wisdom of your answer over and over again.
Yeah, I like that. There's an influencer I saw, a video meme, as we see too many of them these days, who was talking about, my ideal workout regime is like 2 hours, 45 minutes of weights and this and then gratitude and a cold plunge, but my minimum is 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups. Right. And so that you can have a checkbox, right? Because that's the same thing you're talking about. I'd like to do 45 minutes. And some people will be like, well, I can't do 45, so I'll do 0. And then you get a little X for that day. Figure out how to get that checkbox. I'll give another example because I think this is just right in line. I played semi-professional soccer, and my run was always 3. Like if I just went out and I hadn't trained for months, I would just run 3. And I'd run 3 once or twice a week. And during pandemic, my wife was going out and running just 2 miles. And I was like, I can run 2 miles. Like I should run 2 miles. And by cutting back my workout, I now work out 5 to 6 days a week instead of 2, maybe 3 days a week. Right. And I've added some other things since then. But this, what is your best game? The best game sometimes is a lot less. Sometimes the best game is get out and walk for 5 minutes. Like whatever that looks like, 5 minutes is better than 0. 5 minutes every day is better than 35 minutes once a week. Like these are, I think that's a really great concept. I don't know if you wanted to expound on that or.
No, I think you just beautifully did. You gave some great examples of how that could be brought to life for sure. Mm-hmm.
What does your practice kind of demographics look like? Men, women, young, old, like a particular, do you have like a focus? Everyone who comes to you tend to need to work out more or needs to work out less because you're, a cardio junkie at one point?
I would say so. I'm about 60% women and 40% men. And I would say a lot of the women, whether they're specifically coming to me for mastering their weight, a lot of them, at least that's like, and I'll have a side of weight loss with that digestive distress resolved, right? Whatever it is. So that's a big portion of that group. The men, it's often around energy and digestion. That's a kind of a recurring theme for the gentlemen who I work with. And in the way of age, most of the people who I work with are anywhere from their low 30s to kind of 50. That's common. There's some outliers on that for sure, but kind of 32 to through the 40s is pretty common.
Okay. So you've been doing this for a while. Biohacking the name didn't exist when you started. What are your thoughts on trending topics like biohacking, intermittent fasting, wearable health technology? And are there any that you would recommend or maybe even caution against?
Well, I will start with intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, I think for a lot of people, and I would dare to say women in particular, is disordered eating rebranded. In my experience, in my opinion. But I'm not saying no one should do intermittent fasting. I take a very individualized approach. So if someone approaches me, should I do intermittent fasting? There are a few questions I go through in my mind. First of all, do I think it will produce the outcome you're looking to produce? Like, what outcome are you looking for with intermittent fasting? Do I think it's going to produce it or not? Right? My stepson, for him, he does intermittent fasting. One of the things he noticed is he actually thinks more clearly when he doesn't eat until later. Okay, cool. So that's working for him, right? The other thing that I look at is, does it feel like punishment? Right? Does it feel like punishment? My stepson's like, no, it's great. I love it. It makes my life so much easier. Okay, cool. Is this something you could do? Like this approach, is this something you could do kind of forever? Unless you decide to change something, but you don't have the pull to do something else, right? And that kind of is a tie back to the self-aggression, right? But if it checks the box for, okay, produces the outcomes you care about, and of course, we'd want to check that on objective measurements with that, like actual labs, right? Produces the outcomes you care about, doesn't feel like self-aggression, is something you can sustain, then great, I'm all for it. But for anyone who it's like, I'm still struggling with my weight, it's like, okay, well, maybe that intermittent fasting isn't working for that outcome. And then, does it feel like self-aggression? If that's a yes, then I would suggest you consider a different approach. And then I would suspect if it feels like self-aggression, it probably is not sustainable.
So it's interesting because we've talked a lot about kind of mindset, and the way you think about things really changes, right? So like your kind of switch to thinking differently about nutrition probably didn't result in your diet changing the next day, right? It was a slow evolution, and also how you thought about it gave you a greater appreciation for the food that you were and were deciding not to eat. I've described, and I think this is similar, that a lot of diets feel like, are kind of focused on calorie restriction or whatever, and you get this kind of negative situation of, I'm hungry, I don't like this diet. Like, that's the aggression that you're talking about. With intermittent fasting, there's a mindset shift, which is, hunger's the goal. Like, you're actually supposed to be hungry for a couple of hours, 3 hours maybe, and that's the goal. And for me, I've always tried different diets and done different things, and I feel like I'm the regular person who's constantly trying to drop 5 more pounds or whatever, 5 more pounds of fat specifically. And intermittent fasting has just always felt like, oh, I'm hungry. Yes. Instead of, oh, I'm hungry, this diet sucks. It's an interesting shift. But I like your approach of, hey, is this serving you? Is it going to serve you long term? Can it serve you long term? Is it serving whatever the actual goal is? And like you mentioned, mental clarity being the goal and achieving it, then great. Like that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the way you're talking about it, Chris, too, because like I can hear it really working for you, which is awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's really good. And then you still have to like keep getting a lot of protein, because I'm 55 and I have to eat a lot of protein in order to maintain muscle mass. And actually I've been growing, so that's been exciting. What are some of the most exciting advancements in functional medicine or health technology that you believe will shape the future of healthcare?
I think, to me, so much of it is in the data. So people getting more access to data and to understanding the data, to me, that's huge. And I think that will continue to shift over time. I think that people will continue to be able to access more and more information. Now, I think with that comes oftentimes this like false belief that all I need is information, right? Like I just need a plan. And it's like, no, if you just needed a plan, you could consult ChatGPT. I'm sure they'd do a fine job on creating a plan, right? I don't know. But it is way more than a plan, right? You need to understand that information. You need to understand what it means as it pertains to you and your health. And then also, of course, bring in your unique why, right? Bring in that heart-centered approach. I just don't typically see the data making a big difference in the absence of all of that brought together.
Do you have a favorite test that you like to do like that? And what is that test? What piece of data about a client would you most like to have? And you almost get it wrote for all of your clients?
I would say I don't have one favorite test. Like the panels I do at Quest, like I said, are super comprehensive. But I would say thinking about like in the specialty lab tests world, a couple of tests that I would say I commonly reach for. Oh gosh, Chris, it's so tough to choose. But I would say I do them, just given the nature that I work with a lot of people with digestive stuff going on, and also the brain-gut connection. So if it's anxiousness or depression, there's a brain-gut connection. If it's skin stuff, there's a gut-skin connection, right? So all these different things. So a comprehensive microbiome assessment, also lovingly called a 3-day poop test. Just what it sounds like, right? So we're not talking about like the one-off 1-day collection. Those are not typically super useful. These are super comprehensive assessments of the microbiome, understanding what good bugs are present and what aren't. Are there parasites present? Are there yeast present? Are there viruses present? Are you actually digesting protein, fats, carbs appropriately? Not everybody in the world needs to be on a digestive enzyme, right? is there excess inflammation in your gut, which, by the way, then points to an autoimmune condition, right? Ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. So we get all of this super rich information in a microbiome assessment. And there's just no other way to get this information, right? It's a great test. So that is a test that I would say, of all the specialty lab tests, that's probably the one I do with the most frequency. I'd be happy to talk about others, but that's the one that I probably do with the most frequency.
Yeah, I like that. And actually, I just did a 1-day poop test, which I understand is going to be significantly less valuable than the 3-day. So I might ask why I did just a 1-day, and why I'll do a follow-up that'll be on a podcast. But that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense to me, because like there's a lot of variability in your digestive tract from day to day.
For sure. And you actually can't rule out parasites without 3 days. It's actually it's like, if you look to, traditional medicine and their standards, gold standard for ruling out a parasite is a 3-day stool collection. Now, I will tell you, they often ignore that standard, but I don't. And that is why I find parasites sometimes. Not everyone in the world has a parasite, but if you have one, you have one.
Dr. Hehmeyer, this has been an amazing conversation. I've got some wrap-up questions. Dr. Hehmeyer, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
120.
120. I love it. And how long do you believe humans can live?
I think it's probably somewhere in that 120 to 130 age. I think, currently I'm thinking 120, but I imagine that we could see it get pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're now one of, I think, 5 of some 70 plus people that I've interviewed whose number matches their belief, which is really telling, I think, about how we're currently unable, and I think this is shifting, but currently unable to separate living longer from living in an infirm state, because like nobody really wants to live in an infirm state. So that's pretty awesome. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody loves shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
One is bookending your day. Bookending your day, because to me, that is how we can cultivate a mindset that really serves us. So starting your day by grounding in your intention for your health and your life, ending your day with perhaps reflecting on your wins. That's one thing that you might take on. There are many different bookends you could take on at either end, really. But I do believe that grounding in your intention is really important at the beginning of the day. And at that other bookend, it could be counting your wins, acknowledging yourself for the actions you have taken. It could be reflecting on what you might learn from the day and do better on a different day. It could be, reconnecting to your intention again. So bookending your day is number one. Number 2 is, simply put, eat lots of vegetables. Eat lots and lots of vegetables. And you, if there were a point system, you get to 5 extra points if they're cruciferous vegetables. But, being things like cauliflower and broccoli and kale and bok choy and Brussels sprouts, for example. So those are powerhouse antioxidant rich nutrients. Third thing I would say, spend time with people who bring you joy, being joyfully connected to others. I gotta tell you, it is like these last years in particular, beginning in the pandemic, it's like, gosh, that was, I think, in all of our faces, what a gift it is to be joyfully with others. And, you mentioned at the beginning that my husband and I spent some time living in Switzerland, which was a fabulous adventure. But it was, it was difficult to be that far away from our friends and family. We made other friends over there, but it was just, to have that time zone gap was a challenge. And it really helped me see how important it is for me to stay connected to people who bring me joy, besides my husband, who brings me lots of joy.
Yeah, that was one of the obvious things for me.
Yes.
If you just isolated yourself with him, then he obviously brings you lots of joy. That's great. So bookend your day, eat lots of vegetables, bonus for cruciferous, and then spend time with people who bring you joy. This one is sometimes harder. What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
A few things. One is I would say, okay, so let's think about this. One is they do too much cardio and they don't do enough strength training. That helps me because I really wanted a few more on that 3 list. So, too much cardio, not enough strength training. And another one, and it is insufficient focus on nutrition as a whole, right? Oftentimes people think that if I just exercise enough, it's okay if I do XYZ nutritionally speaking. And having been one of those people, I understand it, right? Thinking I could exercise my way out of, I mean, I thought I was making good choices, but now based on what I know now, right, I would say not true, right? So you can't exercise your way out of lots of sugar or lots of simple carbs or more alcohol than serves your body, right? You just can't, right? And so that would be the thing. And I appreciate that is confronting, but the faster we confront that, the better we can move along in the journey of mastering our relationship with food and beverages and making shifts that we can sustain over time.
Very cool. Dr. Hehmeyer, how can people contact you?
Yeah, you can contact me at wellempowered.com. That's EMPOWERED.com. And you'll get my assistant Erin there. But you can also find us at wellempowered.com, where you can schedule just directly a complimentary consultation. And, a little gift for your guests, if you go to wellempowered.com/gifts, you'll find some secret, unique discounts just for you if you would like to explore, if you would like to proceed in working together.
Excellent.
You can also find me on
Instagram?
Instagram at wellempowered.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
Oh my goodness. Well, as you shared, we recently moved to Costa Rica. So I'm excited to explore the area where we're living. I'm excited to jump in the ocean. And I'm also excited to have some family members come visit in these months ahead. It'll be really fun.
And get to see some of the volcanoes. My wife went and saw an active volcano. She was on a separate trip from me, so I didn't get to see the active volcano, so we will be going back.
Awesome.
That should be great. All right, so you can find Dr. Hehmeyer at, email at wellempowered, EMPOWERED.com. Also, you can get a free gift at wellempowered.com/gifts. That's a plural, gifts, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can connect with her on IG at wellempowered. Dr. Hehmeyer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Chris. Such a treat to be here with you and your community. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.